Hello, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Melissa Ringfield, and I have the pleasure to be introducing this wonderful panel. We're calling it Exploring Genres of Social Media, Fiction, and Verse. Our first presenter is going to be Annika Skovnes. Annika Skovnes is currently a sophomore at the University of Central Florida. She's majoring in graphic design and has a minor in writing and rhetoric. She is a student heavily devoted to her studies and her interest in the arts. Annika made Dean's List in her college in her first semester and hopes to uphold this further into her college career. Upon graduating, she is looking to get hired for designing and packaging and advertisements. Her essay, Fictional Friendships and Their Effects on Socialization, was written in Jacob Stewart's ENC 1102 class in 2015. Jennifer Anderson Peters is a sophomore at the University of Central Florida with a major in marketing. In her first 3 semesters at UCF, she made both the Dean's List and the President's Honor Roll. She aspires to incorporate creativity into all of her future endeavors, including any positions within the marketing industry. She enjoys drawing, being involved in the campus Christian ministry crew, watching YouTube videos, writing fiction, and hopes one day to publish a novel. Samantha Glaser is currently a sophomore at the University of Central Florida. She is majoring in elementary education. She enjoys working with children and helping them learn. She particularly enjoys introducing children to the joy of reading because it opens up not only a world of learning and information, but also a world of imagination and adventure. She would love to teach any grade in elementary school in the future. She regularly attends UCF's Harry Potter Club and would like to thank her wonderful friends she's made there, as well as her amazing family, for helping to inspire this paper and speech. Casiano Aponte is a sophomore majoring in health sciences preclinical at UCF. She currently works at Orlando Health Physician's Associate and is licensed as a nursing assistant. Her goal is to attend the Adventist University of Health Sciences to obtain a master's degree in science as a physician's assistant and work in neonatology. In addition, in between school and work, she likes to watch her favorite shows, including Orange is the New Black, House of Cards, and Game of Thrones. Please join me in welcoming all of our panelists. Annika Skovnes' paper, Fictional Friendships and Their Effect on Socialization, was produced in Jacob Stewart's Spring 1102 course. Go ahead, Annika.
Thank you. All right. I'm sure everyone here can remember a time when they felt like the new kid in class, when everyone else seemed to have a friend but you. You were probably desperate to find some sort of way to connect, to be of some use, or to contribute to a conversation. For many, people found this means to do this through club activities, group classwork, etc. However, some people still had trouble connecting to other friends and making friends. I myself was one of these kids. While I'll go more into depth about myself later on in my speech, the reason why I'm bringing this up now is because my experience is what introduced me to one of my first passions, books. A lot of kids like myself use books as a way to take a break from everyday life and simply enjoy a different reality. In it, they experienced adventure, fantasy, amazing characters who they followed on a journey to save from the world whatever impending doom was threatening it. It was because of my love for reading and what it did for me as a child, which led me to research the topic I'm discussing with you all today, the existence of bonds between a reader and a character, and how they can serve as a valuable means for socialization. As a child, I attended a middle school outside of my zoning district and had a really hard time adjusting to the change at first. I often found myself unable to connect with my classmates, and as a result, kept socializing with my peers to a minimum. It was around this time that I started reading novels. At first, reading allowed me an outlet to take my mind off of my communication issues, but I soon found out that there were many others like myself out there. I was able to make friends quickly through a shared love of stories and characters, and I'm still good friends with those people today. If it weren't for my initial interest in books, I'm not sure if I ever would have become friends with them. It occurred to me that lots of kids may share a similar story to mine, and this inspired me to research further and see if connections made through fictional characters can actually be used as a set of tools to help other children better communicate with their peers. Going into this project, I didn't realize just how heavily debated the subject was. Researchers are still undecided whether it's actually possible to form a bond with someone who doesn't even exist. For my research, I took the stance that there is in fact some sort of bond between the two. I started my research by looking up other authors who dabbled in both child behavior and fictional bonding. After that, I decided to perform my own investigation through interview and survey. This allowed me to gather general information about the populace while also looking at specific situations on fictional friendship and how they affected the individual. The first part of my data I wish to tell you about is the results of my interview. In it, I questioned my friend and current dorm mate, Samantha Glaser, about her experience with fictional characters. She wholeheartedly advocated the existence of these bonds of friendship and went on to tell me about her attachment to her favorite book character, Hermione Granger, from the well-known Harry Potter series. From what I gathered, Sammy was able to grow and bond with her as the series progressed, and even relied on the female character's strength in times of hardships. She shared a deep connection with Hermione, looking up to her as a role model and sharing a deep feeling of camaraderie through both their similarities and their differences. By the end of this interview, it was apparent to me that Sammy thought of Hermione, a fictional character, as a close friend or even a sister. The second part of our interview was more heavily focused towards child socialization. During this part of our talk, I proposed to her a hypothetical reading program which would be implemented in schools and consist of students reading novels of choice for non-educational purposes. This program was devised by myself and was meant to create an environment where reading books wouldn't be frowned upon by your peers, but instead encouraged with the reward of socialization. When I asked Sammy on her thoughts on such a program, she said it would be a great idea not only for boosting child self-confidence and communication skills, but would also help foster a generation who better appreciates the everyday novel. When I asked about why this program might be more effective than other clubs, she noted that it's probably because reading is easily accessible to everyone, whereas some skills are required in club activities are not. Furthermore, she believes that kids can better express themselves through the book characters and explaining why they like that specific character. While I was able to gather some great data from Sammy, I also had to make sure that her situation was not an isolated event. This is what led me to surveying 33 random UCF students from the UCF class of 2018 Facebook page. Assuming that my random sample is representative of my general age group, the results were very much aligned with my interview. A large majority of the participants claimed to have felt a bond with a fictional character before. Additionally, I found that of those who did, these bonds were most commonly formed in middle and high school. When the participants were asked about the same hypothetical program as Sammy, I also found that not only was there a positive reaction to the idea, but that many felt they'd have been most receptive to it in their middle school years. The last piece of information I had learned from my research group was how book length seemed to affect the bonding process. The trend I gathered in my results seemed to say that the longer a book series is, the more likely people were to bond with a character. This shows that much like real friendships, the longer you stay with a character, the closer you grow to them. Now that I had all this data, I needed to find a way to show you all that my research proved some sort of bond actually existed. After reading through the research works and then looking at my own, I was actually able to find some proof of camaraderie, though it wasn't in the way that I first expected. I determined that this unique feeling of friendship came from a combination of the reader's personality, writing choices made by the author, whether the book's content coincided with something happening in the reader's life, and a sense of growth over time between both character and reader. Since no reader is alike, the relationship that forms between the two is always different in some way or another. While writing my essay, I understood that there was no true way to show friendship when there is no mutual connection. However, I did find the bonds of friendship and the relationship that forms between a reader and a character to be strikingly similar to each other. Fictional people and their real counterparts can both have shared interests or comparable backgrounds, as seen in my interview with Sammy. Additionally, while the two don't interact face-to-face, the bond that a reader forms can be considered akin to someone watching as the child next door grows up, as stated by the researcher Blanchette. The two may never speak to each other, but nonetheless, a bond still forms. These bonds can become valuable tools of learning and connection, helping students of all ages to communicate with those around them. Even my research seems to support my stance, and especially advocates the use of programs like these in middle school specifically. We all know middle school was a confusing time where things like peer acceptance and identity all started to come into play. If we were to make reading more socially acceptable for young kids, by the time they reach middle school, they'll feel much more secure in using reading as a means to connect with other students. Reading would become less of a task and more of an enjoyable pastime in the eyes of the younger generation. Furthermore, if we delve further into this subject, we would most likely see a rise in student reading levels. If reading becomes something to look forward to, it wouldn't be unreasonable to see higher motivation, class participation levels, and reading scores. The last point I'd like to address before I draw my speech to a close is the specific importance as to why we should use a book's characters as a vehicle of communication rather than the book as a whole. While a story makes for a great conversation, there's only so much that can be said before it becomes common knowledge. This is where characters differ. As I stated before, due to the reader's unique experience with each character, the same character can yield very different reactions from people and continue to remain a flexible subject of conversation. Characters, through the minds of their readers, can continue to grow past their stories. Use of the bonds and flexibility of a fictional character can allow us to help foster the next generation's growth, both socially and as a group of readers.
Thank you, Annika. Good job. Jennifer Anderson's piece, Charitable YouTube Discourse, Markiplier's and Elements of Online Communication, was produced in my course last spring, ENC 1102. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Alright. To relieve stress, I spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos. One of my favorite YouTubers for a while has been Markiplier. Maybe you've heard of him or watched his videos before yourself. If not, Markiplier's main content consists of video game commentary, basically his reactions to the various video games that he plays. He belongs to an expansive YouTube network of Let's Players in the online gaming community, whose videos are the same, or not the same, but similar, but just with different personality. He has a rather humongous community of more than 11 million viewers. Yet one of my favorite aspects has always been his efforts towards charity. Let me explain. Markiplier not only plays video games for a vast audience, but also uses his internet platform to create a positive impact on society. Over the last 3 years, Markiplier has raised over $500,000 for various charities such as the Cancer Research Institute, Able Gamers, and the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, amongst others. He raises his money through charity live streams on the streaming site Twitch. And every time, he has many people tuning in and giving. Once, the total day's effort of $50,000 was raised in just 1 hour. And through all of this, I wondered, how did Markiplier's work on YouTube translate into this generous environment, into this charitable force? How is he able to steer all of these individual people towards a common goal? The first key to understanding Markiplier's success is understanding the concept of participatory culture on YouTube, and online in general. Participatory culture exists where there's communication and interaction. That is when people not only consume, but produce and share their own ideas. This is how YouTube is structured, and how it took off independently of mass production outlets, such as TV or the radio, when there's little to no interaction between consumer and the creator. Communication through YouTube videos allows users to broadcast themselves and receive exposure that was never possible before without a big budget. YouTube transcends physical boundaries, and global communication is better achieved. The comment system provides a community-oriented interface that helps YouTubers grow. And when YouTubers do grow, their fans cluster into discourse communities. These types of discourse communities are often called fandoms, maybe you've heard that term before, because they rally around a central text, idea, or person. In this case, it's Markiplier. While an individual can consume their desired materials independently, fandom allows that person to share their ideas and their reactions with others who also enjoy it. These like-minded people to have more potential together than they could have apart. In fact, researchers agree that the interactive value in these communities can help prompt activity within them. In this case, the activity or action I'm talking about is what the collective fan base can work towards or produce, be it fan art, projects, or events. Fandoms can also be influential to those outside of them. In a study that tested the potential of fandom members, Aponte and her team found that those outside of the group could benefit through the mobilization of group resources for charity, public education, and greater community building activities. This leads evidence to the fact that fandoms are a potentially great source of action. So how did Markiplier rally the community specifically for charity? This is seen through his use of social media, a big part of the modern internet, as you know. Interaction capabilities between people has dramatically increased through the use of the internet. Social media is one of the ways this has happened. Users of social media can interact with others in their circle and at the same time make their voices broadly heard. The ideas and identities that can be shared through social media cater well to the fandom activity. The way Markiplier uses social media to assist this interaction with his fandom says a lot about its potential as a good communication medium. This is especially true when thinking about his community on a global scale. Without social media, he couldn't interact with such a large number of people realistically. Because of this, achieving a larger platform for charity becomes easier for him. Yet these generalities don't get to the meat of the issue. In order to better understand the specifics of how a YouTuber like Markiplier communicates with his fans, I need to conduct a more thorough analysis of his interactions through his videos and social media posts. This is where my hands-on research truly began. On his most used sites, YouTube, Twitter, and Tumblr, I selected a fixed number of posts chosen at random. I analyzed word choices and made a record of the types of rhetoric that appeared and in what context they were used. I then assigned them each a category, which you can see on the slide. In order to measure the effectiveness of the rhetoric Markiplier used, I also need to know how the fans felt about him. To do this, I created a survey about just that, and shared it on the Markiplier focus groups on social media, such as the Markiplier tag on Tumblr or the subreddit @Markiplier. What I found was that Markiplier seemed to take an active role in open communication within his own fandom. And indeed, community seemed to be at the forefront of Markiplier's mind. In the selected vlogs on his YouTube channel, Markiplier often engaged in inspiring hope regarding the charity work of his community. One empowering theme struck out the most to me. He said, "You guys have so much more power than you know to change the world." He said this a lot. He ultimately approached this mentality by expressing his opinion that every member of his community had the unlimited potential to do good in the world. He built on the esteem of the viewer as an individual identity who was part of the larger community. For tweets and Tumblr posts, it was much the same. For example, about 50% of the gathered tweets were both encouraging in rhetoric and in direct response to an individual. In his Tumblr posts, however, only 20% were. Most Tumblr posts were as a general announcement or expression of his thoughts. In almost all of his videos, he focused on sharing a personal experience. When he shares his stories, he creates a relatable identity. Each social media outlet seems to serve different purposes. This might suggest that online communication is effective when dealing with a large number of people. It makes interaction more seamless and less disengaged. To add to this evidence was the fact that in the distributed survey, it was shown that much of Markiplier's message indeed had a profound impact on his viewers. When asked about a personal experience with Markiplier's message, a telling 82.89% of respondents agreed that Markiplier had possibly impacted them emotionally in some way. Charity also seemed to be an area of great significance to the fans. 100% of them felt that Markiplier's live streams were either important or very important, as opposed to neutral or not important. Positivity towards charity and championing charity efforts seems to be a key component here. Additionally, in regards to charity knowledge, over 97% of people claimed that at one point, Markiplier had made them aware of a charity that they previously did not know about. This suggests that Markiplier's live streams are a good way of spreading the word about trustworthy charities. In fact, many respondents noted that they felt his charity live streams were a good outlet for their desire to donate. This confidence in the legitimacy of the charity could prompt a larger number to donate in the long run. Because of the personal connection that's evident here, Markiplier is able to generate trust, and thus makes crowdfunding for charity easier. So here's where my original question stands. How did Markiplier create this giving community that I've seen? As I've discovered through my study, Markiplier achieves charitable success by emphasizing the importance of the community as a whole and encouraging them to have confidence and to use their talents for the good of others. He focuses identity around charity and vocalizes this through the specialty that is online communication and social media, and is shown to be very effective with his fans. Markiplier's style and medium deserves recognition of merit. While it might not be the absolute best way to raise the most for charity, certainly I couldn't claim that, it certainly covers a niche that others may not expect, or may underestimate. I also don't claim that the fandom is perfect, no collective group could ever be. But there's a lot to be admired here. In transforming modern views, Markiplier and his community stand as an example of how new technological mediums can be used in ways never thought of before, in order to benefit humanity. Now, this study only looked at his work specifically, leaving a lot of room for further questions. Many of you out there might have your own favorite YouTuber. Think about this. Do you see any of the things I mentioned today in what your favorite does? And next time, when you engage or interact or observe any fandom, how do you see them come together and interact? Keep watching, keep participating. It might just lead to something great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Samantha Glaser's piece, The Literacy Journey of Harry Potter, a study in versatile sponsors via multimedia, was produced in Jacob Stewart's ENC 1102 course last spring. Go ahead, Samantha.
All right. Many of us have interests that have stayed with us our whole life, something we really enjoy. For some of us, it's a series of books. For others, it may be a series of films, seasons of a TV show, or a series of video games. What if I asked if this interest taught you to read and write? I'm sure some people would think that sounds a little silly for something other than academic interest or for school to do, but I disagree. I feel that our interests can have a huge impact on what we learn and how we learn. I found this to be true by looking at a beloved interest of mine, Harry Potter, and my lifelong learning experiences with it through its films, novels, and theme parks. The conversation on literacy learning I wanted to join started with Deborah Brandt's definition of literacy sponsorship. This term refers to how forces in our lives shape how we learn the skills of reading and writing. This term became a major foundation for many discussions about sponsors of all kinds, like Harry Potter. Winifred Radigan elaborated on how the series' strong characters can be relatable role models who spark emotions in those of all ages. Tisha Beaton discussed how the books could be used to teach science and math in addition to reading and writing through its imaginative world. All of these writers made great points and were major inspirations to my work. However, these writers, like many others, looked only at the Harry Potter books as sponsors, ignoring the immensely popular films and new theme parks. I found this blank interesting and chose to look at it, as I felt those two mediums had much to teach as well. I knew this due to my own experiences with the Harry Potter series. These experiences became my method of research through a self-case study. This reflection led me to coining my own term building on Brandt's, which I called sponsorship versatility. This term relates to how a sponsor can teach skills beyond traditional literacy through reaching its audience in a variety of ways. Harry Potter is my prime example due to its strength as a sponsor, coming from how its many forms of media can work together to teach many types of skills. I will show just how true I found this to be by telling you what the Harry Potter series taught me. I will begin with my elementary school days and how the films helped my reading skills. I will then tell how the books taught me life lessons in high school. Finally, I will discuss how the parks impacted my freshman year here at UCF. The first Harry Potter film hit theaters in 2001 when I was only 5 years old, and yet I credit the films as a major sponsor to my reading skills. I saw the film and was amazed by the story of a young boy going to a school full of magical adventures, creatures, and amazing friends. I wanted more, but movies take time to come out. I had already enjoyed reading and decided I could read the books to help the wait pass. Naturally, my reading level was a bit too low, so my parents read a chapter or two a night to me instead. I was inspired to read all I could as I grew in order to get my reading level high enough to read Harry Potter on my own. I would read books on anything that caught my interest. The films gave me an interest in fantasy, leading to reading about dragons and other magical creatures, along with fairy tales and mythology. This interest in magical creatures led me to reading all I could about the amazing creatures in the real world, sparking a love of science from a young age. Eventually, I was far above the reading level of any of my classmates and nearly always had my nose in a book, finally reaching the skill level to read Harry Potter at a very young age. The films are an example of a multimedia sponsor that has very strong introductory power that displays its versatility in the variety of skills they can introduce by encouraging reading. Films are a good entry point for many because it is a visual medium, making it easier to absorb than a series of novels. The films can also encourage fans to look into the novels when they have the time or skills later on. They also act as a springboard to encourage not only reading skills, but in other areas of learning as well. My love of science, zoology, and mythology were all inspired as a result of my avid reading spurred on by the films. This love of reading grew along with me as I became a teenager and the Harry Potter books grew with me. For many of us, high school was not the easiest time, often stressful and busy to say the least. My love of Harry Potter helped me during this hard time through the more mature novels by teaching me life lessons and reading skills. I connected very much to the character Hermione, who acted as a role model to me and inspiration to me through both her strengths and weaknesses. She was interested in pursuits some would call nerdy, felt she was not pretty, and was an anxious perfectionist who often worked herself too hard in school. But she was also a very loyal and caring friend, extremely smart and proud of who she was, knowing that it is the heart that counts. Nothing made me happier than when my parents and friends would say I was their Hermione, helping me feel proud of who I am. This pride helped me gain the confidence to take a creative writing class. I had admired the Harry Potter books so much that I hoped to write stories that could help someone the way Hermione helped me. One story I ended up writing was called Finding My Wings, the story of a small bird who felt out of place due to its dull feathers that differed from its loved ones. However, it was the love of its family and friends that allowed it to be reborn in its true form as a beautiful phoenix, the flames of its worries and fears becoming bright feathers full of pride and hope. That little phoenix symbolized what I learned from Hermione and my loved ones. The books acted as the most impactful sponsor for me, as well as the most versatile. The books provide diverse, relatable, and emotional role models for readers of all kinds to promote personal growth. The fantasy style of the books make it come alive and inspires imagination in fans of all ages. My own writing style became fantasy-oriented due to my love of the books. I wanted to help others find their wings and spark their imaginations just as Rowling's writing had done for me. The novels taught me more than just literacy or academics. They taught me how to spread my wings and be proud of who I am. While I'm on the topic of spreading my wings, so to speak, I come to the final stop on my sponsorship versatility by way of Harry Potter. It was right here at UCF, where a new chapter of my life began as a college freshman. I had just moved here all the way from Connecticut. I was afraid of being alone on this huge campus. It was then that Harry Potter came to my rescue again, through the parks introducing me to new people. UCF has its very own Harry Potter club on campus, and it is there I went in hopes of making new friends. My first major event with the club was a trip to the parks, and it is a memory that will live on in my heart forever. It really made me feel like I belonged, and that I had found my place among friends. We went on rides, took group pictures, waited in long lines to see the actors from the movies answer questions, and had many fun discussions along the way. Now I am happily enjoying my life at UCF, and new friends, old friends, and family alike come to visit the parks and step into the magical world with me. The parks may seem like a superficial part of the multimedia empire, but it is actually an incredibly strong, versatile sponsor. It does not promote academics or personal growth, but social skills. You physically step into the world of magic and are surrounded by those who have a common interest with you. Everyone is in robes, holding wands, or sporting their house colors. It creates a sense of comfort, going up to a fellow Gryffindor or Ravenclaw you have never met and being able to easily talk by mentioning you are in the same house. People of all ages gather to enjoy the world they have watched in films and read about in books, together as a group, bonded by the emotions they carry and the lessons they have learned from the series. Harry Potter is a great example of sponsorship versatility, boasting so much to teach and so many ways to teach it. The films encouraged my love of reading and learning. The books helped me grow as a person and share what I felt through writing. The parks act as a major social link that helped me start a new chapter in my life. But I wrote this paper and this speech in hopes of building on a conversation, and I hope others will build on what I have found in turn. This is only my story, and Harry Potter is only one example of a versatile sponsor. I hope future writers look at their own beloved series as well. All you need to do is look back at your own journey and see what you have learned. It might just surprise you how much you learned from a seemingly nerdy interest simply by enjoying it.
Thank you, Samantha. Our final panelist today is Casiano Aponte. Her piece, Elements of a Storm, the Rhetoric Behind a 7th Grade Poem, was produced in Adele Richardson's ENC 1101 class in fall 2015. Go ahead, Casiano. Don't forget to keep the microphone close to your mouth.
Rhetoric.
Yeah, I needed to sit down a little.
Rhetoric, unbeknownst to some of you, is the driving force between all forms of communication. Whether that be verbal or written, your favorite novel or the State of the Union address, a casual conversation between your friends, or trying to convince your parents to buy you a new car, or in my case, letting me door my first year of college. Rhetoric includes an audience, the different constraints and limitations experienced, the redditors, or who all was involved during the development, the construction of meaning, and the mode of delivery. When I was first being taught what rhetoric was, all I could think of was, if this is true, then rhetoric transcends writing. Well, indeed it does. I knew very little of what rhetoric was when I first delved into trying to write a paper that sought to explain the rhetoric of a past piece of writing. Now, what brings me here today was not a paper that I wrote my first semester of college that happened to be good enough for me to speak to you all about today. It was an event that took place almost 8 years ago. I wrote a poem in the 7th grade not knowing what rhetoric was, and in creative writing, the analytical mind of a 12-year-old doesn't revolve around the invisible forces of literature, but what they feel in the moment. I didn't write for likes or notes or reblogs, shares, comments, or popularity. I wrote this poem because I was scared. And there you have my exigence. I was scared, all because I thought my home was about to get destroyed by a tornado. I was at home with my younger siblings when my mom was picking up my younger brother from school. All of a sudden, the wind picked up and started to howl. The trees bent over, looking as if they were about to uproot, and there was a cry somewhere in the distance that sounded like a train, and I thought there could only be one explanation. I ran down the hall to my brother and sister in the bedroom, and I yelled, "Get down!" in preparation of the imminent destruction. But how did I know that I thought it was going to be a tornado? At 12, I loved watching TV documentaries about natural disasters and tornadoes. Instead of Nickelodeon, I watched Discovery Channel Storm Chasers. I supposedly knew the warning signs of when a tornado was about to hit, like the heavy rain, the increased wind speed, and the all too infamous sound of a train. Knowing the worst possible outcome, I knew I had to protect my siblings. You see, my construction of meaning is what developed my fear, my exigence. If I had not known the warning signs, if I had not watched those TV documentaries, if I had no interest in tornadoes, I would have gone about my day without a care. This past knowledge is what made me act. It made me scream, "Get down," and it made me communicate my feelings both verbally and when I wrote the poem. My siblings, however, had no idea what was happening outside or what I thought, so when I yelled at them to get down, they just stared at me and laughed. I laughed too because I was pretty embarrassed, and I tried to play it off like I was trying to be funny, but when we went outside, destruction really had occurred. Trash from our neighbors in front of us had landed in our backyard 100 feet away. The shingles on the roofs were torn off, and the hinges of our fence were worn backwards. It wasn't a tornado, but it was something. It was not the finger of God. To validate the emotions I felt after being laughed at, I wrote my poem, thus becoming my second form of exigence. Now, about a year later, at a get-together with the neighbors, they recollected about a storm that blew through in 2008, creating a microburst, which is a vertical column of rain accompanied by an intense downdraft containing winds up to 100 miles per hour. It wasn't a tornado, but my little cul-de-sac was targeted for such a phenomenon, and I knew then what the event actually was. It had a name, finally. A few hours later, after the event, when I sat at my desk and started to write, I didn't want anybody to read it. This poem was for me to alleviate and validate my emotions. I was the first, last, and only person that was ever going to read, validate, and criticize this poem. But as I was dissecting this piece of literature over a couple years later, I finally understood who this poem was for. It wasn't for the 12-year-old me. It was for the 18, the 25, the 40-year-old me. This poem was for my future self, to tell me, do not forget what happened here. And it worked, because I haven't forgotten, and I doubt that I ever will. The difficulties that came with writing this poem were some I believe all of you have felt at one point. Should I make it rhyme? Should I use quatrains? Should I use couplets? How many stanzas should I have? Then there were the added limitations on top of that, like what words would I use to make the rhyme flow well and the line flow? The constraints were further exploited by my 7th grade vocabulary, and my less than impressive verbiage did not benefit my writing techniques. I wasn't aware of the latter at the time, but was definitely present and indicative. These constraints made it so this poem was less relatable than when I first wrote it, influencing my response to it many years later. The delivery of what you're trying to communicate is imperative to the effectiveness of your argument or piece of writing. Delivery is catered to your audience, like playing a sad Sarah McLachlan song during a commercial is going to elicit a stronger response than putting an ad in a newspaper. For my poem, I wanted to symbolize destruction on paper. Now it seems silly, but I chose a font that looked post-apocalyptic on a beige piece of paper, and then continued to burn the edges of it, making it look old and forgotten about. Like it was a piece of relic that was found underneath debris that people had just simply forgotten about. It seems silly, but I wanted to solidify this experience in the best way I could. My brother and sister, only 11 and 4 at the time, compelled me to feel the way I did, probably more so than any factor that I have talked about thus far. I feared for their safety above all else and was convinced a tornado was about to destroy our home. Because they were present, they are partly responsible for the way I perceived the situation and the discourse that took place. If I was alone, I feel like I would have taken more time to protect myself, either go into the bathroom and get in a tub, or go into a room or bedroom that didn't have a window. But instead of taking more time to think about the situation and diagnosing if it really was a tornado, I ran to where they were to protect them. They shaped my actions, the discourse, the situation. They became the writers of this story. Realizing this years later, I understand why I acted the way I did and can only assume that if a similar situation were to occur, what I may do and how I may act. I have found that revealing the rhetoric of a piece of writing puts your subconscious into perspective. I didn't have time to influence my decisions or think about the consequences. Instead, my instincts took over, and this was only visible to me when I started to question the rhetoric. As I was dissecting this rhetoric behind the 7th grade poem, I realized it wouldn't be the same piece of writing if one of those factors have changed. If my siblings weren't home, if I had never watched documentaries, or if I wrote this for a class project, the final piece would have changed dramatically, let alone how I even handled the situation. This means that rhetoric is situationally contingent, where just one factor affects the overall piece of writing. After writing this essay, I found how rhetoric is used in all circumstances. Even now, as I am presenting to all of you, I have used my knowledge of rhetoric to morph this presentation to one that you may actually enjoy or could benefit you in the future. How you present your argument or point of view in the future relies heavily on how you control the different elements of rhetoric. Just like the elements of the storm, it leaves you with one hell of an impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Casiano. Now we do have a little bit of time. If anybody has any questions, we have some microphones on the side, so feel free to get some more information. Very informative presentations. I do have a question for you guys. Was there anything that helped each of you try and find your topic? I know a lot of my students right now are struggling with their topic. So was there advice or ideas that helped you choose what you were going to write about for these projects?
Well, for me, it was actually when I came to this panel last year, there had been a speaker. It wasn't one of the student speakers. It was an older, I think, a faculty speech. And they had mentioned something about how when they were younger and used to read, they used to like treat like characters as friends. And so that kind of just kick-started my idea. I'm like, oh, yeah, that relates to me. Like, I can relate to that. And I kind of just wanted to look into it more because not a lot of people actually look at like the characters themselves in books. They kind of just look at the book as a whole and just like, you know, how the story affects people or how reading affects people. But they didn't really look at how characters and like each specific character and what that character can do for a person can affect a population. So that's kind of how I wanted to look at my paper.
I just say like find like something you really love and really enjoy, because you'd be like really surprised just how many aspects there are to even something that may seem insignificant to you. Like when I started thinking about a YouTuber and charity work, like what rhetorical value is there in that, and like I kept researching and discovering just how much people had already researched YouTube, how like again the participatory culture, how it like exists in like pretty much everything. So you just like stick with what you really love and you can really find something interesting, just like focus in on it.
I actually got the idea for mine when we read a paper in my ENC 1102 class about what Pokemon can teach you in terms of reading skills. And as much as I love Pokemon and I would have loved to write about that, I didn't just want to tell the same story a different way. So I decided to look at another one of my favorite things, which is Harry Potter. And I thought, if Pokemon can teach you how to read and all these different skills, what could some other interest? So I just looked at some of my nerdy interests and how much it actually taught me when I looked back.
The essay that I wrote didn't pertain to the research paper that I wrote in my 1102 class, but when trying to find something to write about, it's best to go back to a memory or a point of your life where it was easy to reflect upon. Write about something that you're interested in or something that pertains to your interest or even your career goal. The piece of writing that I wrote about was a poem that has stuck in my memory for a very long time, and amongst the various other poems that I've written, because I love to write poetry for a good portion of my life, this one stuck out to me. So it's imperative that you write about something that you're interested in or something that sticks in your mind well enough to reflect upon.
Thank you, ladies. Any other questions? Over here.
I have a question. I enjoyed your panel tremendously, and especially like the way you looked at so many different genres. So I wanted to ask if during this research, did it change your perspectives of these genres and how people use them and how useful they are?
Well, I mean, I'd like to imagine, like, I've always been really interested in books and, like, how that can affect people. And I've seen, like I said, my friend, how when you grow up, how books can, like, really affect you. But learning like through other people's research papers and kind of actually looking at my own, I really did see that a lot of it isn't the book itself that can help change you, but it could be like the characters, like I said, or the things that come off of books, or ideas pertaining to books, or like the person's background, if that corresponds with the story, how that can really affect someone like really deeply. And like it's just really interesting to see how that can all like really affect people, and how that can direct how they take like their path in life. Like just how one simple book or character or story or movie can just be like, oh yeah, I want to do that, or I want to be able to do this for people. And like how that can really set them on their journey as a writer, a filmmaker, like really anything. And I think it's really cool that stuff like rhetoric and books and literacy can all do that for people.
Definitely when I was thinking about like YouTube stuff, I never, like you can't take what like they say and like what others even say at like face value, and you don't really like think about just like the rhetorical value of what they say. And thinking about like none of this he says is like fabricated, like that's his thoughts and his words. And you start to more think about like your own rhetoric, like what you say is gonna have a big impact on people whether you think it or not. So it was way more deep than like I thought it was gonna be, like how much it applied to like my life and like others' lives. So it definitely made me look at stuff like this in a new way, and like charity in a new way too.
For me, I just found it really interesting to see how much you can learn by just having fun. I want to teach elementary school in the future, and I honestly do think the best way to learn is to not force it. Just let kids enjoy what they're doing. Let them read a book that they really enjoy. Let them read Harry Potter instead of assigning them a book that you read when you were in school. Just enjoying something can let you learn so much, and it's amazing how much you can learn, not only from books, but from films, or from YouTube videos, or from even just going to a theme park and just having fun with friends.
Listening to the other panelists and reading the other publications that have been through stylists on research papers, when I was trying to find my topic in my 1102 class, it had really broadened my perspective on what forms of literature can be used to help explain rhetoric. Between movies and books and even YouTube, I see that there's a vast space out there for you to help communicate. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, ladies. Let's give them one more hand. Thank you.